We'd like to welcome you on the Tech Factor podcast by Purple Quarter. Today we have an amazing guest with us, Gaurav Bhalotia, my favorite. And Gaurav, we've known each other for so long. Thank you so much for coming in house and doing this with us.
Thank you, Roopa. My pleasure. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Gaurav, for the people who don't know you, of course, you have computer science is in your blood because you did your bachelor's and master's both in computer science. Then you did move on to a couple of these companies which were all strong in technology. And what's beautiful about this is you moved different locations as well. Yeah. So you worked with companies which were US based, Vietnam based, India based. So would you be able to tell us two important factors? Two striking things come to my mind. One is technology of these. How do they think? Right. Second, in terms of culture, how are these companies from these different regions? Could you talk about that?
So that's a very interesting question, right? Good question, right? Uh, so I think the large difference between these regions, right? US, I would then put India and then Vietnam, right? I think it's the stage of evolution, right? Of technology, culture, where they are, right? So when I moved back to India, I felt India was like 10, 15 years behind, right?
Right,
US, right?
right.
But over time, we have actually very, very quickly caught up, right?
Hmm.
So the gaps have been bridging. And I think same is true for Vietnam, right? So Vietnam is again behind India. And if you look at two factors, right, which there'll be few, right? So I believe the first one, right, which differentiates is I believe product thinking.
Sure.
Okay, so how non-transactional you are, right? When you're
Hmm.
writing software, building systems, right?
Hmm.
How deeply connected to your end user you are, right? So use
Right.
your user orientation, product thinking. How can you relate to that product, right?
Right.
India's journey started by building products for US and European markets,
Correct.
right? I think the big shift in India started happening when we had our own startups, companies solving problems for India, right?
Hmm.
And I believe this is again a stark difference. When I was in Vietnam, right,
Hmm.
I saw that is something which that country is playing catch up on,
Right.
right? So there are of course companies solving local problems,
Hmm.
but not a lot of people who have been in those roles.
Hmm.
What again helped India was cross pollination. A lot of Indians moved back from US, right?
Correct.
I myself moved back from the valley, right?
Right.
So a lot of these people came in and we're not happy with the status quo here, right? So
Hmm.
one status quo, right? For example, I was not happy, right? And we put in a lot of effort at Flipkart early on, right?
Correct.
Solving for that is not having a technical ladder for growth,
Hmm.
right? So India used to be a place where becoming a manager was cool, right? So
Right.
everybody wanted to become manager, right?
Sure.
And in the US, you had seen that you could grow, right? You could become a
Hmm.
fellow, right,
Hmm.
at a company, right, who is probably at a VP, SVP level, right?
Correct.
Senior most individual contributor, right? So to make that right an exciting part, right? So make sure that there is a ladder, there is a well-defined path to get there, and there is appropriate reward, right,
Hmm.
for people who are growing in there. So product thinking, I would say, is one, right, and largely again something connected to, I would say, the same evolution, right, journey where you are. I would say availability of mentors, right?
Perfect. Hmm.
So,
Good point.
like something like 10 years, 12 years ago, right, in India, right, one of the things we were actually very, very actively, right, trying to solve, right,
Hmm.
was get senior folks who have seen these systems built for scale, right,
Right.
built for relevance, right,
Hmm.
so search, recommendations, right, so people who have seen it, done it, can mentor, right, can work with young engineers, young product managers, right, and there is on the job training, right?
Sure.
So if you see a lot of countries like Vietnam, Indonesia has done a very good job. Is
Hmm.
they've gotten talent from other geographies. A lot of
Correct.
Indians in there, right?
Hmm.
And I think Indians have immense contribution, right? Especially right now in Indonesia's journey, right? So many good folks, leaders, right, are there, right? And I think that ecosystem is also feels like marching ahead, right, at a good pace, right?
Right.
So I think that would be second one, right? Availability of mentors,
Hmm.
right? There's one more, right, I would like to call out, right, which makes, I would say, a complete strong engineering culture
Hmm.
is like different dimensions you can think of, right? So it is not just, oh, I need this code or software to do this. Is it doing it correctly or not, right? So that is functional aspect of software, right? But can you take care of non-functional aspects, right? Can you worry about security, data, privacy,
Correct.
right? Can you actually think of usability, right? It's not just okay, this app or this piece of console or software is doing what it is supposed to do, but is it very, very usable,
Sure.
right? What is the friction? What is the cognitive load the user has, right? Similarly, performance may, can I actually breach, right? Push the envelope, right? I'm not happy with just this responding back in 2 seconds, let's say, right? I want this to be sub 0.5 seconds, right? I think so. I have seen over the last 10 years, right? A lot of these considerations creep in, right? Into engineering teams, mindsets, how they approach problems, right?
Right.
And as you see today, right, the baseline is high, right? All of us, right, are users of WhatsApp, Facebook, a bunch of
Correct.
these apps, right?
Correct.
Even for us at Udaan, right? So we, for example, are with the retailers, right? The small entrepreneurs. We are empowering them, right? Making commerce happen in the country, right? So there was a belief, right? Ki, are these guys going to be very, very tech savvy, right? So they may not have done some of these flows, right, using app or technology, but they do have a certain bar for experiences because every day they open WhatsApp, right? So
Correct.
they know that as soon as I send a message, there are two blue ticks which come in after reading, right?
Sure.
So they've gotten used to that instant gratification, right? So again, I think this is a third factor which distinguishes good teams, right, from I would say average teams. How can they actually take care of all of these factors, right, and create the right balance? Of course, you cannot uh, build like a very, very performant system on day one, right? So you have to iterate, balance, right? But
Right.
good teams do that better, right?
Sure.
I felt ki US may it was more natural, right? That ecosystem has been at it, right? I have seen those problems,
Right.
right? There were specialized programs on user interface design, usability, right? If you know, right, when they launched iPod, the head designer, right? They looked at so many shades of white,
Correct.
right, which would go into that device,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So that level of attention, right, to details, right? And I think I am proud to see that ki we are there, right? Including Udaan, right? Design, for example, is an important aspect, right?
Sure.
Building for Bharat, right? Designing for Bharat.
Sure.
So yeah, so
Right. So I'm just going to take a cue from what you just spoke about, and I think I'd like to pick up on one specific,
Sure, sure.
part of your career journey. When you went into Flipkart, and I still remember that you took care of the entire data platform,
One
right?
of
So yeah. So if and that time India was still struggling to understand ki ho kya raha hai, what is data, how do we actually look at it? Could you tell us a little bit of what were the features that you actually thought of for Flipkart? What did you go about seeing as a change? And do you see that as a reflection now on how companies have adopted to what you guys built?
yeah, yeah. So see at Flipkart, right? I'll actually like share like how it started, right?
Sure.
That data journey,
Sure.
right? So at Flipkart, I think I started by building data-based products. Okay, so initially I was looking at website, app, but what we used to call customer platform,
Correct.
right? The journey of the user as they land on our site and complete a transaction. And then we said we want to use data, right? The first place we started using data to improve user experience was what we called relevance platforms. So your searches, recommendations,
Right.
right? So we played with interesting new recommendations. Amazon used to be the player, right, who
Correct.
introduced recommendations, right? Amazon or Netflix, right? Recommendations. Indian audiences were still coming to terms, right, with recommendations.
Sure.
We realized we built it very quickly. We could see a significant uptick, right? If you talk about numbers, right, uh, within I would say within a year of us launching it, right, more than 30% of our orders were flowing through recommendations.
Wow.
Right. So, and while everybody knows, we could clearly see the power of data,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so for that was the first database products, right?
Sure.
Then we actually said, where else should we use, right? So we started using data in marketing platform, right? If we launch a new category, right? Who are the users we can actually reach out to, right?
Right.
If they're buying perfumes from Flipkart, right? Are they likely to buy this new category we have launched? Okay?
Sure.
When I'm actually reaching out to the user through notifications, right? What is the best time of the day to connect with them, right? So we actually started playing with these, right? So we found that there are some people who are more likely to open it on their mobile phones,
Sure.
right?
Right.
So when do they actually access their mobile phones better, right? And when they are likely to not just open but also transact, right? Convert based on that. So we started actually having this journey, right, in few of the products, right? And we sat back, right, said, can we make it more deliberate? So data was evolving as a need of different product areas.
Okay.
So we said, can we actually build what we said platform, right? It's called a data lake, right? Where we'll get all the company's data, right?
Together,
So piping into that thing, make it easy for people to build data-backed products.
Right.
Right. Make it easy for people to build and launch AI intelligent products.
Sure.
And I think that was the genesis, right? So
Right.
how do you, so things which we started building out, we focused on, right, was how do you make it easy for people to share data?
Sure.
Okay, put it somewhere, right?
Sure.
How do you make it easy for us to drive governance of the data? Is it good? Are we missing something? Are there errors, right? And then finally, how do you ensure that it is easy to consume that data, right? So dashboards, programs, AI models, right? And so that's how we went about building that platform.
Got it. Got it.
So scale of data at Flipkart, you can imagine, right?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I think by the time I was looking at it, we used to have 5 petabytes of data,
okay.
right? And multiple, like I think at that point of time, like 50 terabyte plus, right, generated every day.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So if you see, right, like you would have heard from folks, right, with data, right, the challenge today in today's world, right, people are on two ends of the spectrum. Right? So there would be some products, companies, right? They'll say, I don't have data. For my use case, I don't have data, right? In my previous startup, I think we were in that bucket, right?
Correct.
How do I get data for the application I want to build, right? There are, I believe, people on a bunch of companies on the other end of the spectrum where they have a lot of data. Okay, having data is not a challenge, right? Making sense of that data is a big challenge.
True.
Right?
True.
Now today you would see that there are these CCTV cameras and
Yeah.
we are generating a lot more data, right? Humongous amount of data than we can process.
Correct.
Right? So I think that was the genesis of data platform, what we said, right? Can we centralize it, right? Can we get this massive amount of data, make sense of it, make it easy to process that data and extract value from that data, right?
Sure.
And I think I would say we were not the ones who started that trend, right? So like US may some larger companies like Facebook and all had shown, right?
Sure.
There has to be a data platform.
Right.
We were one of the first to adopt it, right, in India, right? Very quick to realize that this will become our differentiating mode, right? Data, right? It's not Flipkart. It's not because Flipkart has been around, right, for a long time that Flipkart will win, but because Flipkart has understood, right, what these users want, what works, what does not work, right? How do you create better and better experiences for these users, right, day in and day out, right? And data is the mode. And so I think we started that, and right now I would be surprised, right, if you find any startup which says, any company, tech company, startup, or okay, I don't have a data platform.
Right.
Data platform is a key thing. Right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. No, what I like, what you just described, it's not just about data. The first, response that you gave about product thinking is also come into what you were saying, how Flipkart, adopted not just to look at how data can be used well, but there's a lot of product thinking also which has gone. What does the customer really want?
Correct.
How do we actually make the best use of
Correct.
it? So I think that's the beauty of how you've, the first to the second, I see that there is a flow of how India is probably improved as well. Yeah. So, in terms of the second part of my question, right, adoption in today's date and time with data platforms, you did say that people are looking at it in a format. Right? The other piece that I wanted to check with data comes also how are we storing this data, right? We're talking about the infrastructure as well. Yeah, and with monolith cloud infrastructure kind of reaching its, in this fast moving pace, reaching its limit. Do you think all this can actually be composable at some point of time? What are your views on this one?
So I think, see, Rupa, like just to clarify, I think you're talking about hybrid clouds versus a single cloud, right?
Correct.
So yeah, I think this is a question which is top of mind for a lot of CTOs and CIOs,
Correct.
right? I keep hearing this question in other forums, right? Uh, See, I think we are at a stage, right, in the evolution of technology, right? Cloud came in and we realized, right, we could focus on what matters to the company, build our application, our functionality, and offload, right, availability, scale, reliability to a cloud provider,
Correct.
right? So I still remember 2012, right? Flipkart mein, we had our catalog,
Right.
right? A massive catalog which powered our website, right? And we were storing it in MySQL,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
And there was no like relational database service, right? Cloud providers who do that, right? So there was a large dedicated team, right, to ensure that we can run MySQL at that scale, right? Keep it up, right? There were investments in specialized hardware, right, to do it. So it's a I think a uh, deep, highly specialized, skill-oriented work, right?
Right.
Hard to get people, right, who do this, right?
Sure.
And you have to be on it day in and day out, right? Now cloud comes in, right? So startups, right? On day one, you can go to RDS, right?
Correct.
And you start with a small instance, but you can very quickly scale, right, to let's say um 10,000 requests a minute, right? So it is able to support that kind of data coming in, right?
Sure.
So cloud, the way it started, people were really overjoyed, I would say, right? It's solving my problems, right? I can focus on what I need. Generally, the clouds are generally very reliable, right? So there is a concept of SLAs, right? So what percentage of time, right, you can actually like trust ki they will be up and available, right?
Sure.
So we measure that in like nines, 5 nines, 4 nines, right? Which essentially tells you ki in a month what is the maximum downtime which will happen.
Correct.
Right? So we are looking at, for most of these services, less than like say 10 minutes of downtime in a month.
Oh,
right?
okay.
So it has to be that highly available and stuff, right? But so what it did was, most of us, right? Most of the companies, everybody is on cloud today.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And all sorts of applications are coming on the cloud, right? And this is where this question comes in, right? Okay, now that you are on cloud, right? Are there any challenges or downsides, right, to being here that you see? I believe ki the biggest thing you end up seeing, right, eventually for a company which grows, right, massively, right? Say Udaan, right? So we have a huge footprint on cloud, right? Flipkart, we had again a huge footprint, right, on our own data centers, right? Is you start realizing ki if things go wrong, you have very little control.
Oh wow. Okay.
Right? Because somebody else is doing, right?
True.
They are not expected to go down, right? When they go down, something really bad has happened, right? And anything can go wrong, right?
Sure.
Right? So
Sure.
in clouds, right? If your data center is in a country which is prone to flooding, right? It could just be water, right? Out of your control, right? Which has happened. So, but if things go wrong, usually it is bad, right? So most of us face that challenge, right? Ki, you have to figure out a way to mitigate the downsides or impact on your customers,
Right.
There can be instances where there's very little you can do, right? The provider is fixing it, right? So these are one kind of challenge you see. I think the second challenge you see is there are multiple cloud providers.
Right.
Some are good on something, others are good on something else.
Correct.
Right? So as your dependency on cloud platforms, right? We call them platform services, right? That starts increasing, right? So you realize that some platforms are much better, right, than others on some
Right.
of these services,
Sure.
right? Third challenge you see is your cost starts becoming material, okay, over time, right? So I think like everything in life, right? What is good, right, eventually ends up showing the challenges on the bad side, right? So
Right.
what was working to your advantage, right? For example, right, in cloud, it is so easy, right, for me to empower my engineering teams.
Correct.
You need to build a new service, scale it out, right? It's just a command, right?
Sure.
Or a click on the UI, you scale it out, you provision new databases, new VMs, right? But it also means that at scale, you need the right governance. Otherwise, your costs will just bloat up, right?
Correct.
For that reason. So I think that's the third thing which hits companies. We have seen that at scale, most companies have gone to their own cloud strategy.
Right.
There have been exceptions, right? So all the large players, right? Facebook, Google, that's how they started, right? And then Google is eventually externalized it, right? So
Correct.
GCP is available
Yeah.
as a platform for others. There are companies like Netflix who decided ki I will not, right? I'll continue to depend on AWS, right? But they have very, very deep connections, right? So there is a lot of custom work happening for them, right? To
Okay.
actually solve for all these three things I'm talking about, right?
Sure.
Cost hai, availability of features, capabilities hai, right? And uptimes, right?
Right.
Just to make sure they have least number of challenges there,
Sure.
right? So a lot of other companies, even China, right, Alibaba's and all, they ended up building it, right?
Correct.
Flipkart decided to build its own cloud, right? So
Right.
we had our own cloud team. My current take on this is a multi-cloud or a hybrid cloud strategy, right? Now that's what I think is one of the ways to mitigate it.
Sure.
So you create infrastructure, right, which allows you to take best of what is available to you, right? Or certain services, right? For example, you depend on a cloud API, right, to do OCRs, right, or to do very, very accurate facial recognitions, right? And one of the players has a much better performance at this time, right? So these are all evolving, but has a much better performance. Why would you not do what is best for your business?
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So ability to go to multiple clouds. I would say ki even the ability to have some things of your own, right? So ability to say, for example, bring up certain like platform services yourself, right? Which allows you to do deeper integrations with your data, right? For example, you are storing sensitive data, right? KYC ke liye Aadhaar cards and other things, and you wanted better native support, right? For hashing, encryption, making sure that data is more secure, right? And you don't want to put it on the cloud, right? So I think keeping those options, right, are the thing to do.
Got it. Got it.
But it requires investments, right? So does not come for free, right? You need to invest in that, right? So one of the biggest costs, for example, in cloud is taking data out, network ka, right? So if you are on two providers, right? So you'll have to figure out how you do the data movement between the two.
Right. But there's also another piece to this, right? You should have worked on these different cloud uh, providers as well to really know what is it that the best thing that you can pick. Technically, when I speak to a lot of technologists, they've ideally worked on one, right? So what you're giving is the hybrid approach. For that, I should have had experience on looking at how the other ones are.
Sure.
So is there any place as a technologist I can go check or?
See, well, I think the best experiences on all of these, right, is by having used it,
Sure.
had success or been burnt because of it.
Okay.
So nothing replaces that, right? I think while we are, I would say ki fairly evolved, right, in terms of cloud usage, I would say ki not all cloud providers have the best of documentation. Okay. So your ability to go read it up and figure some things out, right? I wouldn't say it is at that kind of level, right?
Sure.
So what teams really want is you want folks who have worked on things
Got
prior
it.
to this, right?
Got
So
it.
they carry experiences. I think that
Right.
that helps a lot more, right?
Got it.
There is documentation, right? For most of the things, if you're starting up, like the OCR example I said, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
You can go search and you can find folks have done like elaborate blogs,
Hmm.
right? On pros, cons, precision recall for various APIs, right? So
Sure.
for something very specific, you can get, right?
Hmm.
But I see a lot of this cross pollination happening,
Hmm.
right? So some companies are on Azure, some others are on
AWS.
AWS, right? Some are now coming up on GCP,
GCP.
right?
True. True.
And as people actually move, right, to different environments, so that cross pollination happens, right? And
Sure.
with them, they bring in these, right? So this is one of the philosophies I very, very strongly believe in. Ki never hire for like these specific skill sets, right?
Okay.
Ki you have worked on Azure, right? So it
So,
will be, you will be
sure.
more productive. Never, right? So you know how to work with the cloud, know the nuances, right?
Hmm.
You know what to actually take care of, right? कि कहाँ पे cache करना है, नहीं करना
Hmm.
है, right? Where will I be hit by the latencies on the
Hmm.
cloud, right? Where will I be hit if something goes wrong, right?
Hmm.
So those are like more fundamental first principle experiences, right?
Sure.
And over time, I think that cross pollination anyway actually helps teams,
Correct.
right?
Correct. No, this is brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Gaurav. Lot of info that I got as well. Moving along, if let's talk a little bit about your current journey, Udaan, right? And this is one of my favorite topics about supply chain, which is completely, um, I would say that it's yet not constructed in a manner where we all can enjoy and say that, hey, supply chain is actually in the right direction.
Yeah.
But what is Udaan doing from a technology perspective to reimagine, how supply chain works?
Yeah, yeah. So see, so Udaan mein supply chain is the way we look at it is right. It's one of the fundamental capabilities we are building,
Right.
So our ability to have first reach, right? How many cities and towns in India can we reach, right? Second is the experience or service, right? In those pin codes, right? Can I do hyperlocal,
Right.
So on demand delivery. Can I do next day delivery, right? Can I ensure that deliveries happen within a time window,
Right.
2-3 days,
Sure.
right? So these are service levels,
Sure.
and of course, make it happen at a certain cost,
Right.
right? So, so at Udaan, I would say that there are again like I would say three broad types of investments, right, to make it happen. First one starts at the network design level,
Okay.
right? So there are various components of a supply chain network.
Right.
Okay, so you have warehouses, you have got hubs, you have like people who are picking products from shops or sellers, getting them into the warehouse, so that's inbound, or taking products from the warehouses out to the customer,
Sure.
outbound, right? There are assets like vehicles involved, larger vehicles for transporting for longer distances, or shorter vehicles for last mile, right? So how do you actually organize all of this in a network, right? Which allows you to get the right balance of what I said, reach, cost, and service levels,
Sure.
right?
Right.
So that I think is the first area where we invest very strongly in this capability,
Okay.
right? Second one, well, again, I think seems very straightforward, right? Is there is a lot of, if you see, right, you can clearly see system and human interaction happening. Okay, for supply chain to work, right, there are people all over the place.
Correct.
Right? Warehouse, they are picking things, packing things, they are sorting, binning. Delivery may again they are picking, sending it to different locations.
Correct.
Delivering it to the customer, taking payments, resolving issues, right, exceptions. So there is a human system interaction, right? How do you actually make all of these humans a lot more efficient, a lot more precise, right? What kind of support tools you can give, right, to these guys, right? So a fairly standard thing, right? Most supply chain companies would do, right? So for our supply chain executives, we give them handheld devices, right?
Oh, okay. Okay.
So when they're picking, right, their handhelds will tell them, right, what is the next thing to pick, right? So what aisle, what row, how many quantities, have they done it? Can we actually get them to scan it, right, instead of typing in? As
Sure.
soon as if they picked it, right, can they scan and then take them to the next level, right? And
Right.
how do you create this list of items to pick? We call pick list, right? In what sequence, so that you optimize that
So everything's
travel time.
barcoded and
So you figure out, right?
okay.
So it has to be barcoded, right?
Right.
Because I think the way we do is we have to make all of this very, very productive.
Correct.
Right? Both for cost reasons and experience reasons, right? So for example, if you wanted to do 10-minute delivery of a product, right? You want to make sure कि अब उस distribution center से आप 2 मिनट के अंदर पूरा लाके पैक करके आप ready कर दियो, right? So not just barcoded, the placement of these items, right? So you need to know कि which one of them will go together, right? So you place them in such a way that going through them, right, you travel the least distance, right, and you're able to fulfill that pick list, right, in the shortest amount of time. So various kinds of things like that, right? Now products come in, right, from vendors, right? So when we are getting them in, right, how do you reconcile ki which was the purchase order against which it is going? What item in our catalog this is? Where should it go and sit in the warehouse if it needs to? If it does not need to be inventorized, right? What are the running orders where I can directly actually flow them in? Right?
Okay.
So there are a lot of moving parts, right? Things are always moving.
Right.
Like
Dynamic.
products are moving, people are moving, machines are moving, right? So how do you coordinate, right? So software which does that, right? Systems which are doing that. And I would say the third investment, right, which are sometimes medium to long term, is in automation. Right, so we do a lot of it in house also, right?
Okay.
So, for example, one of the big categories for udaan, right, is food, fresh, FMCG staples, right?
Sure.
So now we actually collect some of these fresh items directly from farms, right? So once you're collecting, you need to sort them, grade them, weigh them, pack them, right?
Sure.
So we have machines, we have profilers, right, who can do this, look at dimensions, weights. We are working on automated graders, right, who can grade, sort and grade and do it, right? So a lot of we get this feedback, right? And it comes in the experiences our customers have, right? In one of my field visits, right? So a customer told me, sir, the potatoes, right? There are 4 things I never go to mandi to buy, right? Potatoes, watermelons, onions, right? From udaan, right? And potatoes, because I feel ki your potatoes are graded very well. Once I get that sack of potatoes, they are all the same size.
Oh, nice.
Right? Same quality, same size, right? So now being able to do this at such a massive scale, right? Automation, right? Is one. We have like picking robots, right? Where like we are experimenting with robots who can pick item and bring it to the picker. Right. Instead of picker going to the aisles and getting them.
Sure.
And so this is part of the network design, right? Can we actually push the boundaries of that cost and what service level is possible trade-offs?
Sure.
Right?
Sure. What about shelf life? Because you're speaking about fresh items and they're coming from the farm.
Yeah.
How has technology helped there as well?
So I think very, very good point. It's a very, very important problem for us, right? So one is like, so how can you actually identify lots of products, okay, which lot they are in, right? Be able to know what is an expiry, right? So as orders come in, right, you have to make sure it goes in that sequence, right? It has to be first in, first out.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So being able to track things at a lot level, right? The entire system having the cognizance. Fresh may largely, we are saying ki even minimizing human touch as much as possible.
Oh, wow.
Right? More you touch the products, right?
Yeah.
More, I think it accelerates the degradation, right? So I think the biggest thing to do for fresh, right, is now you see this entire supply chain, right? जो inbound से outbound entire customer तक जा रहा है, fresh में we are getting it from the farms, right? How can you compress it significantly, right? So instead of like 3 days, right, can I move all of this in half a day?
Sure.
Right? Without requiring a lot of human touch.
Got it.
Right?
Got it.
So that plus lot awareness, right? When things are expiring, have first in, first out.
Right. And when they replenish, that is when the shelf life is over, what do you guys
So
to
that is a capability which we call planning.
okay.
Okay, again an important part, right, to figure out balance the costs, right. So यहाँ पे you principle is very simple, right. You maintain the least amount of inventory,
Got it.
which allows you to give the right experience to the user,
Sure.
right. If you are saying I'm going to give you next day delivery of fresh, right,
Right.
so the minimum inventory which allows you to do that, right.
Very
So the
nice.
tighter you get to that, right, better it is,
Got
right. So
it.
but it's a very hard problem,
It's a very
right.
hard problem. Yeah.
So starts with demand forecasting,
Right.
knowing what the demand will be like, right. And there are a lot of external factors, right, which affect this, right. For example, there is a sudden drop in prices,
Correct.
right. People will want to stock it up,
Yes,
right.
absolutely.
Or there is an
Coding.
increase in prices, right. It can bring. So how do you predict that? So I think we got a strong data science effort, right, around this. Uh, so it starts with getting all the data, right, what we call signals, which can feed into this planning process, right. Plus making sure that there is enough automation controls, right, which drives all of these procurement and other processes via systems, right, and adding the right intelligence, right.
Sure.
So to ensure, so and we monitor and track it very closely, right. So there is one graph, like you can see this team tracking, right. This was the predicted demand, right, and this was the actual demand, right.
Right.
What is the gap between them?
Sure.
Right. So
Sure.
that data science, there is a measure called SMAP, right, mean average percentage error, right. So you keep pushing it, right, to be lower and lower.
Got it. Got it. So if we spoke a lot about the other parts, can we also talk about supply chain from the last mile perspective as well? Because I think you guys have done really well when you're saying that it's coming from the farm to my table, right? The last mile is also super important, right? By the time that I get the produce. So that seems to be a challenge. We've been speaking to a lot of folks who come here from the other parts where there are delivery convenience app or people who even from a health tech where the last mile becomes the biggest challenge. How has it worked for you even during COVID or post COVID, right? During this time, how is it actually streamlined for you guys?
So see, on the last mile again, well, I think same thing, Rupa, right? So investing in, I would say, 2 or 3 core technologies, right?
Okay.
One is, of course, we have our homegrown routing system.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So many vehicles, different vehicle types, road conditions,
All
right?
right.
Different categories, right? So for example, our food is a open box delivery. Crate mein jata hai, right?
Okay.
You can
Got
see
it.
and take it to some things which are packed in boxes, right?
Sure.
So ability to take care of all these different category of products, right? So routing is important, right? So how do you again drive that productivity, efficiency? How do you plan the right kind of vehicle on a particular route, right? How do you predict at a particular location how much you have to wait, right? So starting from that to in fact the app also, right? So we have like a different like a separate app for our what we call field executives, this last mile executives,
Right. Right.
Again, so it enables them on like the speed, right, the route to take,
Right.
and the context of every delivery, right. So the delivery itself has nuances, right. So the order could be placed on credit, okay, the order could be prepaid, or they have to collect at the time of delivery, right. There are objectives at the time of delivery you would probably want to collect using UPI QR
Correct.
codes,
Correct.
right? So a lot more efficient for everybody
Right.
for various reasons, right? The owner is not there; they will not have cash, or they might not have change,
Right.
So how do you actually optimize them, right? How do you make them think a lot less, right? So I think if you push decisions to these individuals, right, it makes it both like challenging to find the right kind of people, right?
Right.
It makes them less efficient, right?
Right.
Because
Slower.
at every point they
Yeah.
are like thinking, spending time,
Correct.
right? Plus, what it does, it also diminishes our ability to quickly ramp up and ramp down. जब जरूरत है, right? So COVID time में मतलब to run a tight ship, right? What was needed was your ability to continue unblocking these deliveries, right? but at the same time keep it tight, right? Align it with demand, right? So I would say कि a lot of these controls where things are technology driven, there are apps, right, which allow these guys, right, to essentially take the right actions, right? There are nudges which would come if there is a deviation, right? So I think that helps. That said, right, on all of these, right, even the fresh piece I talked about or the last mile, I think this continues to be work in progress for
Got it.
us, right?
Got it.
I think there are a lot of interesting challenges, problems we are solving, right? Where we want to be, right? Versus where we are, I think there is still a big journey, right?
I'm
To
sure.
go
I'm
through.
sure.
Yeah.
Right. So, Gaurav, to you and the entire team at Udaan, I'd like to, say kudos for sending even technologists to field to
Yeah.
figure out,
Yeah.
how seamless you can make
Yeah.
this entire
Yeah.
piece. On retrospect, if I look at the number of retailers that are there on your platform, right, there are lakhs of people that are there on your platform. So, from a security measure, right, data protection ho gaya, there shouldn't be any form of they shouldn't feel like there's a data leak or there's a fraudulent transaction that happens. How are all these things taken care of by technology?
Sure, sure. So yeah, so I think this is a good, if you remember our previous conversation, right?
Yeah.
Where we think we want to use data, right?
Right.
To unlock value, right?
Correct.
Experiential value for our users. I think it's very, very important, right? For us, for everybody who uses data, right? There is massive amount of data, right? About users, businesses, right? How do you protect that, right? So the few aspects which come in, right? Protect as in like you prevent unauthorized access, right? You give transparency to them, right? Allow them to take control of that data, right? So there are, I would say, a lot of one standard practices we follow, right? So we are on cloud, for example, right? So all data, right, has authenticated, right, need-based access, right?
Right.
So any data, right, customers, employees, you cannot access it unless you are specifically allowed to, right? That
Got
is
it.
first, right?
Got it.
So authenticated need-based access,
Right.
right? If you see, a lot of these things are powered by systems, right? Technology platforms, right? So when we are on cloud, right, so we take special effort to ensure that nobody can gain access to any of our data, right?
Right.
So we'll sit behind a gateway, behind a firewall, right?
Right.
All of these services, right, which are holding data or actions on data, right, again are in their own subnets, right? We just open a specific well-defined API, right? To all accesses are via standard tech stuff, right? But I'm just reiterating, right? We
Right,
ensure no access, right, to this data outside of these well-defined APIs.
Sure.
All API accesses are authenticated, right? Even when programs talk to each other, right? There is authentication in place, right? Production environment, right, where a lot of this is sitting, right? Even engineers have controlled access, right? There is auditing, there are audit trails, right? So you cannot go and see this. And then thirdly, I would say ki some data is still again a lot more sensitive, even with all these things,
Right.
So we mask them off, right? So give you an example, Aadhaar cards, right? So as part of our KYC, we may be taking Aadhaar card image, right? So nowhere in our systems, right, anybody should be able to, even if they get access to that data, should be able to see somebody's Aadhaar card, right? Or your phone number, right?
Correct.
So we would use encryption, hash it off,
Right.
mask it off.
Sure,
Right.
sure. So, some of these retailers may not understand any of this, what you just said, right, from a technology perspective.
Yeah.
So, when आप जब field visit पे जाते हो and you have this conversation, how do you actually tell them that, the data is safe?
So honestly, I don't think that is a conversation we hear a lot, right? I think
They're happy doing transactions.
correct, right? So as long as I think first, if they're getting the right value, people are fine. But I think
Sure.
it's still our responsibility, right,
Mm.
as a platform, because see, our goal is to build cloud infrastructure for commerce, right?
Correct.
We have to ourselves do the right thing and set the right precedents, right?
Sure.
So I don't think this is top of mind for any of our guys,
Sure.
but there are some things, right? User flows, man, right?
Mm.
So one of the things, I don't know if you are aware, right? So
Mhm.
we have got feet on street field executives, right,
Right.
who can help you with order placement,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
So now it's a whole big world out there, right? So
Correct.
we have to also protect our customers, right, from any fraud which may happen, right,
True.
in the process, right?
Got it.
So there we have a very active fraud and abuse effort,
Mm-hmm.
right, inside our
Nice.
technology teams, right?
Nice. Mm.
So where we identify even like buyers themselves who could be fraudulent or abusing, right,
Mm-hmm.
versus these human actors inside Udaan platform, right,
Mm.
who may be doing that, right?
Sure. Sure.
So we very actively monitor, detect, keep improving our systems to identify this, right?
Right.
And put in some best practices, right? For example, if an order is being placed on your behalf, right,
Mm-hmm.
you are a buyer, right,
Mm-hmm.
and a human executive is helping you place an order,
Mm-hmm.
you will need to support them with an OTP which
Got
comes
it.
to you,
Got
right?
it.
So I think they are hygiene, right, at
Right.
this time, right? But having
Interesting.
those appropriate checks,
No,
right,
this is very,
at
very
different
nice one. Yeah.
places, yeah.
Okay. Perfect. So, Gaurav, the other piece that I wanted to actually talk about is slightly moving away from Udaan and looking at you
Yeah.
as a personality, right? You've donned different hats, right? You worked with multinationals, you worked with startups, then you were consulting and helping a lot of startups, and then you donned the hat of a founder as well. Yeah. And going back to the first part of question that you responded, you spoke about how mentors are important, right?
Yeah.
When a specific region wants to become much better than what they were. So, could you tell us from a journey, from your own journey, right? When you were consulting versus when you were a founder, how did you see that as, was there a mirror image for you when you were a founder to get a mentor? Like the way you mentored a lot of startups. I remember when we used to have our conversations over coffee and you used to talk about different domains that you mentored, right? So did you have that opportunity while you were a founder?
Sure. No, so absolutely, right? Well, I think I was lucky to have a lot of folks who helped, right? But I would also be very honest and say I should have done that a lot more than I did, right?
Okay.
In my journey as a founder, right?
Right.
There, as a founder, right? As a founder, your journey is, I would say, very hard, right? And you start appreciating it uh, fully only after you start a company of your own.
Yeah, true.
Right? And you appreciate the amount of juggling, hard work, right? Your founders at your company are going through that, right? So I would say specifically I had very good mentorship around, for example, one of the areas where I would pull in help a lot, right, was around go to market, right? So marketing, getting users, right? So I might have told you this earlier, right? In my previous startup, right, I realized that while, right, all my life, right, having like created products, created needle movements, like I was telling you, recommendations हमने बनाया, 30% of our orders were flowing through that, right? So all the while we were able to optimize, create that needle movement, impact to business, right? I realized that increasingly, right, as more and more people are selling online, lots of different offerings are there, right, it is very hard, right, for the customer, right, to differentiate signal from noise.
Sure.
Right? Who is really giving what they are saying, and is that really the value I need, right?
True.
So while it is very important to build the right product, right, so create a great offering and build it in the right way, right, the right engineering systems, build it for scalability, usability, right, all the good things, right, it's also very important to be able to connect to your users, right? So one of the things you like called out, right, at Udaan, right, we have like very deliberately, right, invested in is exposing our engineers directly to the customers and the problem statement. Right? So you have to be there, right? Systems, products, platforms are not built to a requirement, right? They have to be built to a use case for a user, right? So I think I had opportunities, right, for interacting with mentors in my journey. And every time I came back very, very refreshed and realizing ki you go there when you are hitting a roadblock, right? You are up against a wall, ki kya chal raha hai, right? For me, the first time, even knowing all of that, right, what we realized is ki our website, right, was talking a lot about our product. Right, why it is cool, why the AI is great, right, why it is very, very accurate, right, it predicts your health very well, right, why this recommendation engine is state of the art, right. But the first mentoring session there was, yeah, user actually does not care about technology, right. A good technology actually sits in the background, right. What they care about is outcome, right. Even for a very, very strong tech enabled play, right, you cannot lose sight of the outcomes which the users care.
Wow, right? Brilliantly put.
So like in Udaan's perspective, prices are what people, Indian buyers, retailers care about it. True. Right? True. So you have to ensure, like one of the efforts we have, right, you have to not just ensure ki you give the right prices, we do a good job, right. So we have teams, we have systems, we are getting good prices, but you have also ensure ki you land that perception correct, right. True. Ki this is in fact a great price.
Sure.
Okay?
Sure.
So both are important.
Right.
Right. So yeah.
No, that's interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. So Gaurav, I'm sure that at Udaan you guys are continuously hiring. Right? When I see when you guys started versus now, the engineering team is like almost an ocean now. Yeah, that's what we discussed last time. So if there is pieces that you'd like to share with the audience who want to come and work with you, yeah, what are a few things that you guys look for at Udaan as, you know, maybe as principles or things that you think from a hiring philosophy? If you could share that, please.
Yeah. So see, hiring के लिए the Udaan में, right? So I think we've chatted about it in various forums, right? So one of the roles we have, which is unique to us, is a product engineer, right? And largely about bringing the two skill sets, product and engineering together, right?
Sure.
Has worked like a charm, right, for us, right? So for that role, also for like other roles, right? So I would say ki like in the technology org, right, would have probably like 10 different roles, right? First thing in my head, right, in the various things you look at it, right? So first, I believe ki you have to ensure ki there is a strong fit to the purpose. Okay, I believe ki everything else starts fading away, right?
Right.
Purpose is what keeps you there.
Absolutely.
Okay, so there has to be a strong alignment to purpose, right? And second, I believe is ki individuals should be excited about what they do.
Correct.
Enjoy what they're doing, right? So if you are an engineer, right, you should really like take joy in writing code, building the right systems, taking care of NFRs, right? So do you enjoy what you're doing, right? Uske baad, of course, right, technical skills matter, right? How good you are at design, architecture, coding, problem solving, raw problem solving, right? Sure. How well you understand what the real problems are. Can you talk to the customer and get that connect, right? What are they looking for, right? It's not what you are being told, right? But what is needed, right? How you can get to that, right? And then finally, of course, cultural fitment, right? Are you a person who's curious? Are you a person who will own problems, right? Are you somebody who will stand up for your opinions, right? Because these are important, right, to creating a very, very good, I would say, engineering culture and product. One of the things I actually, in fact, I feel कि I missed out, right? First question में जो हम लोग बात कर रहे थे US, India, Vietnam, right? There is a concept of decentralized innovation.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So good technology teams and cultures do a great job at it. Okay.
True.
So not everything has to actually come from somewhere, right? Or a product manager who tells you there is decentralized innovation. I think US does a very good job at it. Okay. Most of the companies you see, right, tech companies, people need very, very little management.
Correct.
Okay, you don't need to really manage people, right? What you need to do is you need to show them the direction, you need to show them the purpose or the inspiration, right? And then people move. I think that's one of the things we have done very well at Udaan, right?
Interesting.
So we have invested in teams which we believe are largely self-managing, right? So there will of course be support, right, around issues, exceptions which come in, but we don't believe in like a very tight management structure, right?
Got
So
it.
that is what we have, and that's an important part of culture fitment, right? And we
Sure.
validate, right? Ki are you a person who would actually enjoy in such an environment,
Right.
right?
Right.
Ki nobody is there to manage you, right? But you will be held accountable to like strong goals and outcomes, right? You will be held accountable to the experiences which both internal and external stakeholders, customers have, right? So that would be, I think, the final thing we spend a lot of time, right, to
Sure.
validate.
Sure. Awesome. So, for all those people who want to actually come and work at Udaan, we leave your handles right here on this podcast. One brilliant thing that I'd like to mention to the crowd who's watching this podcast is most engineers actually end up only working on engineering side of problems. What I loved about what you said at Udaan is you have product and engineering coming together. And what makes it even more interesting is because you're actually going down and visiting a customer site and hearing the use case on your own, right? So you're able to solve for someone, and that gives you a purpose. What you just said right at the beginning. So I really love the way that this has actually come together. So wonderful. Yeah, for a lot of other companies who are listening to this, I hope they also use this as one of the ways of going about with their engineering culture. So before we wind up the show, Gaurav, any last few words you'd like to share? You've donned multiple hats to a lot of founders who are watching the show, or a lot of VP engineers who want to become CTOs, or aspiring new people who want to come and join your company.
uh, Make sure, right, ki at any point of time, right, you are doing things because you are having fun, not because somebody else is telling you, right?
Okay.
I think even on job opportunities, kind of things you can do, markets, right, size of companies, startups, big companies, right, they're plentiful, right?
Right.
So I know ki a lot of us continue to, right, it's a journey, right, be in a discovery mode. We continue discovering more and more about ourselves, right?
Right.
But don't lose track of that, right? Know what you're doing, why you're doing, right? Ensure that you are having fun, right, in the process, right? Because I believe ki there are two key things, right? One is purpose, we talked about, right? So you have to align with what you're doing, and you have to derive joy daily, right? Once those two are happening, I think outcomes usually are great, right?
Right.
So great both for you and for the company, right? I think that is the real victory, right? Where it is enriching you, making you happy, and it is enriching the company, right? That is what we strive to achieve.
Correct.
Right?
True. True. So for all those people who want to have fun, I'm sure they'll want to come and join you, Gaurav and Udaan. Right. Thank you so much for being on our show. Really enjoyed having this chat with you today. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Rupa. And, my pleasure, right? I really enjoyed the questions. So, thank you.
Thank you.